Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
WESN.
Welcome. This is Talking Points on WESN, the content capital. And now apparently it seems as though on this show I personally need to be somewhat careful with what I have to say, because a very, or at least maybe not very, but somewhat subjective part of the regulations of this new state of emergency includes public statements. Influence public opinion in a manner likely to be prejudicial to public safety. Now the question is, if you criticize the state of emergency, thereby causing debates to cause people, to incite people to demand its removal potentially, or to decry it in some way, to cast us in a negative light, to influence their opinion, to prejudice them against the state of emergency that the government has defined as being necessary for public safety, is that an offense? More importantly, I do wonder to what degree does the statements made by politicians, obviously you would think, yes, the opposition, the independent senators, they might say something that goes against the government, right? Will that be construed as influencing public opinion in a manner likely to be prejudicial to public safety? Dare I say that they have some members of the government's cabinet whose historical utterances might qualify for that if they were in opposition. However, I do wonder to what extent that the government's own utterances might qualify that. I guess it all depends now on to what extent you will consider the constitutional rights of citizens inherently necessary for public safety. Now, there's a lot with regards to this whole thing within the last 24 hours that I'd like to unpack. one of the things that I was now getting into was the specific keywording of these regulations themselves. Because there is one news report that states let me just get this here. The Minister of National Security may order detention of a person, including a prisoner, if satisfied it is necessary to prevent actions deemed prejudicial to public safety. Now, the key part of that phrase potentially is the Minister of National Security, given the fact that we don't have a Minister of National Security. Now, I don't know if that is that could have been the reporting, which is one of the reasons why I needed to bring it up. Because the flip side is this: the emergency power regulation states, in these regulations, minister means the member of cabinet to whom responsibility for internal security is assigned. Could have just been a typo in the reporter's parts. That said, it's very interesting that essentially, if you look through the entire document, it's left open-ended, almost as though we need other members of cabinet potentially to take point on these things. Let's not define it as the Minister of Homeland Security. Now, where do I even start? There's a couple of things. Of course, the opposition had a press conference yesterday where the opposition leader followed up, I guess, with more detail on one of the points that I made yesterday myself, in that the Prime Minister criticized her predecessor, her substantive long-term predecessor, Dr. Heath Rowley, for not being present during the state of emergency that his own cabinet announced, only to seemingly never be there when there's a state of emergency being announced under her government. And one of the interesting things that she said, which bothers me, is she defended her absence from the address to the nation announcing the SOE yesterday by saying, I don't see any issue with the announcement, it was routine. What exactly of declaring a state of emergency is supposed to be routine? By its very definition, a state of emergency is announcing a suspension of rights because there's an emergency. Are you trying to say, is it a Freudian slip? I am being somewhat sarcastic. I believe the answer is no, but I will ask the sarcastic question anyway. Are you trying to say that under your government, it is routine to be under an emergency? It is routine to have levels of violence that would necessitate a state of emergency. It is routine, somehow magically routine, for criminals to target members of your government to the extent that you need to have special emergency powers in order to prevent any attacks made. This is routine. Or, here's a potential other Freudian slip. Is it routine that you not be there for press conferences? Is it routine that you not be available to take questions from the media? Because in the past, it was that the Prime Minister, during times of importance, was not there at the press conference to take questions from the media. Other ministers did. But now, the current crop of ministers, they couldn't even do that, the ones that were there. They didn't want to take questions for whatever reason. The media attempted to ask, why? What's the reason? Why are you hiding? What's the point of a press conference if there's no press? Why didn't you just release the video? Is it routine, therefore, for this government to hide away from the concerns of the public. It doesn't matter if those concerns are smart or stupid. It doesn't matter if they are well formulated or biased against you. Because if that is what the public thinks, a smart political operator would know, I need to respond to it, as opposed to letting that narrative run wild through the population unfettered. That's one of the things that annoys me the most out of the situation. The lack of positive leadership at a time when it's a state of emergency. This is not routine, everyday life in Trinidad and Tobago. At least it's not supposed to be. When you add things to the regulations that speak to the encroachment on freedom of expression, because on some level, the benign interpretation of that part of the regulation, at least based on how it's reported. I have not time to look through the whole document because in part, some of the links weren't working. But whatever, right? Eventually I got a PDF copy of it, I think. You can never tell. It's not as though the public service or government services are of the habit of properly organizing important documentation and then ensuring that it is readily available to the public. But the way how the restrictions on public statements are made, the benign, most generous interpretation of them, I would argue, did not need any sort of mention in these regulations for the state of emergency. Because dare I say, anything like threats being made or statements being made to incite sedition, that should already be illegal already. So now the question is, and this is where, dare I say, it is not a smart thing to do. Because while I sat on this chair and said, look, as far as I know, as far as I've been told by the opinions of other third-party individuals who understand the technical difficulties of the situation on the Calypso Monarch broadcast, it's not likely to be an intentional act of censorship. The problem is the explanations were so poor, I am not sure if the public was willing to accept that. So in that framework, when the public is questioning the objectivity, credibility of the government and how it operates, now you throw this in. Now maybe this was always there and I just missed it. But the fact that it's highlighted now at the very least only proves the point I'm trying to make. That you have allowed yourself to be perceived as a government willing to go after public criticism. The Prime Minister's defense of the situation, where she basically insulted Calypsonians, definitely did not show any sort of strong emotions on her part with regards to political commentary by Calypsonians. None at all. And before anyone wants to say there's a bias against, listen, the government of the day is going to get criticism. That's natural. That's normal. That's routine. Wanting to snuff it out or silence it, that's when you go beyond the pale. And the fact of the matter is, it could very well be true that the government has no intention to censor any legitimate form of criticism, whether it be art, the media, or legitimate concerns by everyday citizens on social media, letters to the editor, etc. But they are doing a very, very good job of convincing us otherwise. of painting themselves in a different light than what they apparently or supposedly want to be portrayed as. They're doing a good job painting themselves as people looking to avoid questions of the media, looking to silence critics against their decisions and policies. And this is not too dissimilar to some of the criticisms that Dr. Keith Rowley had to field. But as I've said before, the state of emergency announcement press conference of his own government notwithstanding, and I've said this throughout the years of this show, at least he makes himself available, or he made himself available to the press by participating in press conferences on a semi-regular basis. You could argue he didn't do it enough. I think that's a reasonable statement to make. He didn't do it enough, but he did it. As opposed to our now Prime Minister, who, yes, she made public statements all while being leader of the opposition, but her modus operandi was not to have to face active questions from free and open practitioners in the press, journalists who are not necessarily vetted and screened. Because even in PNM political rallies, I saw a few questions thrown at Dr. Keith Rowley. Some people might just think, well, how he can't answer that? Oh, he's looking bad here. But what I thought was, hey, that question probably wasn't screened. Because that question caused the Prime Minister to look unprepared, uncomfortable, and potentially exposed at the time. So I'll always say, I at least appreciate that. You could say it's a very minimal level of responsible communication, but I have been questioning the fact that it seems that we can't even get that, and we're not even in year 2 yet of this administration. Let's not forget the Prime Minister started to disappear more when he announced his intentions to retire. Is our current, the then Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, is our current Prime Minister looking to retire soon? And that's why she's pulling away from the public spotlight? I mean, don't take, look, even the newspapers have reported the Prime Minister utilizing different standards for herself and for her political opponent. What that means is, when you want to have different standards for yourself, you're not operating off of any sort of principle. You're saying statements of convenience. It's wrong for you to do it, but it's routine, so why are you criticizing me to do it? And one of the things that I take great personal insult to is the statement that the SOEs are not a band-aid on crime. Let's just think about it for a second. State of emergency is supposed to be a temporary measure, not a permanent measure or a long-term measure. Doesn't necessarily feel that way, given the fact that we have been under state of emergency for way more months than we have not been under state of emergency within the last year and 2 months. So that's 14 months. Most of those months under state of emergency. And what was done? Yes, crime was reduced. Crime was suppressed. But did we see anything like charges being laid when individuals were arrested? What we saw was exposing the prison service and its ineptitude / corruption. What we saw was exposing a lack of accountability in the various national security apparatus. What we saw was exposing a lack of any sort of headway with regards to the police services modus operandi to improve how they did things. We just saw a set of preventative detention orders that seemingly will not hold up in court because we can charge any of them for anything, apparently, or at least most of them. I wait in dread anticipation of the lawsuits that are eventually going to come down the pipe. And now that we have announced a new state of emergency, are there going to be efforts to detain those individuals again? And will the lawsuits that they already were planning to file against the state, are they going to be doubled now? Because the government is double dipping. There's nothing to suggest that the courts in this country are going to willfully shield the government from its own mistakes. Not on situations like this. And there's nothing to suggest that the Privy Council will somehow be a fail-safe to turn it around. Just ask the minister, the cabinet members involved in the Auditor General situation from a couple years ago. So what are the programs being instituted with regards to the state of emergency to solve crime? What are the programs being instituted to take advantage of these extra powers? Because some people might say, and this is not an unreasonable statement to make normally, well, you don't know what the plans are. You don't know what the intentions are. You don't know what they put in place. Except I could look at the last 6 months of the year, essentially when we were under state of emergency. I could look at that. And I could look to the fact that they had nothing in place, to the point where they had to rush through this Zoso bill to try to give them cover because they had nothing in place. I could point to the fact that the Zoso bill itself was initially touted as being a short-term crime-fighting measure in and of itself, despite the fact that the state of emergency has proven to not be a crime-fighting measure in and of itself, despite the fact that their goal was to arrest gang leaders and somehow that will magically solve crime, and yet we have already seen gang leaders still control the streets from within the prison. That's why they had to take them out of the prison and hold them in a barracks, which might not be legal in and of itself, given the fact that they are not convicted criminals, they are on remand. That alone could be another source of lawsuits. People who are charged of crimes, but still could look to breaches in their rights. These are not things that I want to just see thrown out willy-nilly, by the way, because everybody assumes if we just get rid of these pesky things called rights, it will forever only apply to the criminals. The problem is, until you're convicted, how do you prove who is a criminal and who is innocent? Even then, convictions could be wrong, but at the very least, that is a bare minimum standard that we want to circumvent, to shortcut. If you want a society run in this manner, good luck to you. Dare I say there are many examples in this hemisphere and in the Eastern Hemisphere. I bet most of us would not want to live in a lot of those examples. So it's not a band-aid on crime. How could you make that statement? Because essentially that's what it seems to be. The be-all and end-all of the plan is, well, we'll arrest the gang leaders. What happens when they sue us? I doubt they even have a plan for that. Make no mistake, as far as I know, given her age and given her inability to keep up with the leadership demands currently of running the country now, I will be surprised if the Prime Minister runs for re-election. So there are certain things she doesn't have to answer to because she doesn't care what her popularity is like in the long term. But hey, we don't even know if her responses are here. They probably are. We just don't technically have proof because it's all done by WhatsApp and social media messaging. But to sit on wherever she's sitting, to utilize whatever platform she's using, to say that SOEs are not a band-aid on crime, literally, that's the experience of all the SOEs since 2011. And most of those SOEs were instituted under her. That is her past behavior of record, of note, an inability to do anything more than temporarily suppress crime until the state of emergency is over, and then the criminals know the party's back on. Literally, that's what we saw. As pointed out, you tout the reduction in crime because of your policies. What policies? Because of American activity. Cool. It couldn't even last, what, a month? 2 months? We couldn't even go for a quarter before those magical reductions were at risk of being wiped away. So tell me, where's the long-term prognosis on this not a Band-Aid, or is it a Band-Aid? I will be honest, of all the things, if the Prime Minister legitimately thinks that this is not a Band-Aid on crime, while carrying out an SOE in the exact same manner that the previous SOE was carried out, if the government, if the cabinet ministers, if all of the ministers and the ministries associated with national security legitimately think that they could repeat their actions from the previous SOE and say it is not a Band-Aid, well then I am quite afraid of the ineptitude of anyone that would come to that conclusion under those circumstances. Therefore, given how unreasonable that scenario is, it can't be true. So are we being hit a 6 for a 9? Is it just an attempt to placate legitimate concerns, but being unable to have any sound, reasonable arguments to explain it away, to excuse it away? Rather, all you could do is hope to hide it away. We're not talking now about some dog and pony show. We're not talking about some small money corruption. We're not talking about questions of conflict of interest for a rent of a building. These are your rights. If you do not care for them, well then, all is lost. This is how democracy dies. Not with thunderous applause, but with the indifference of a population. Let's take a break. Hopefully good ladies here. We'll continue conversation. Stay tuned. This is talking about a WESN. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
If you've gotten to the point where you have the aches and pains and they're on a daily basis, they're not transient anymore, then it's probably gone already a little bit too far, right? So what a patient has to understand, what your audience has to understand is the fact that you need to pay attention to self now, in that perimenopausal age range.
We're talking about 40s.
Right? In your 40s.
From the time you hit 40,
in your 40s, you know it's coming. You can't escape it, right?
Start to change the way you take care of yourself.
Yes, exactly. And you have to know what options are available to you.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Welcome back to Talking About WSND Content Capital. And as I mentioned last week, the good lady couldn't join us then, but she is with us now and joining us at a very interesting time, because one could make the case that we are seeing a nexus of issues coming together, and the timing, maybe you could say, could not have been worse or could have been better. It depends on your point of view. These things are complex and the circumstances are ever changing. However, when we look at our country, including the effects of the international incidents, and incidents undersells what's going on recently rather significantly. But when you look at our country and how vast the scale of when you take the totality of everything added up, because arguably it's all interconnected, you are left with a certain amount of concern far beyond the norm, far beyond routine. And to have that conversation, of course, the good lady herself, Karen, is to share.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sean. And I heard you say the nexus. I will say a collision, because that's what that's what appears to be happening. So I'm going to try to take the focus on, as I have done in the party, with the economy. And the new player on the international stage has the invasion of Israel and the United States into Iran, and what it means to us. And I'm looking at that because when we're looking at our economic, our government's strategy in terms of dealing with the economic recovery, it seems to me it is multi-pronged. And the first part of that comes to the international stage. Trinidad and Tobago clearly, this government has clearly aligned itself with the geopolitics, in particular geopolitics of the United States, and there has been benefits. There's no question about that. There has been benefit. For example, Trinidad has, even though there's been criticism from other international, from other countries, condemning United States' position with regard to the invasion of Iran, on the assumption which they have given, they're looking at neutralizing the nuclear armament and to bring an end, so to speak, to what they consider to be a national security risk to the region. But many people look at that and say it is more than that. It's the increase in the price of oil and gas. And Trinidad and Tobago does benefit from that. There's no question that Trinidad and Tobago benefits from the alignment of aligning itself with America's position regarding Iran. Where that is going to end, I don't know if we can really tell, because from when we look at reports that you read on the media, you're not dealing with these countries, and I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but when you look at countries which are very much influenced by religion and cultural norms and very much entrenched, they are prepared to go that extra mile that perhaps another person may just look at things from a purely commercial sense. For these countries, I think the son of Khomeini, which is the leader that they killed, he and his wife and his son, etc., that they were able to kill. Recently, he has emerged as the chosen leader, and what they're saying about him is that yes, he may be more of not a pacifist, he may be more moderate in his views, but he's very strong in his condemnation of the United States, and they are prepared to go that extra mile. You're reading in the media again how they've gone over many of these so-called Middle East countries, UAE, a number of these countries, and they've attacked with full force. And I think it goes beyond commercial. I think it goes to the sense of their religious belief, which is deeply entrenched in Iran and Iraq, and you cannot underestimate the power. But nevertheless, coming back to Trinidad, what I hope to look at with Sean, because the topic is so wide. You know, when I was coming on the program this morning, I said, you know, Sean, this topic is a very broad topic, but let's just slice it into three pieces so that we can edible, consumable pieces. I look at the economy today of Trinidad and Tobago. What is the multi-pronged approach of this government? What is its current status? What is moving forward? And what I believe are the prescription, because there definitely is a need for prescription and recommendations for this government in the way that it handles the economy. So if we look at the economy now, part of the strategy, it seems to me in any event, that the government has taken on is to align itself with the United States, and in particular with Mr. Trump. And they've done that with Iran. Many countries, as I said, have already condemned United States.
Well, also with Venezuela and I believe with Cuba.
Right. So I broke it into the international geopolitics, the regional geopolitics, and then the local in terms of how the government is approaching the economy. So if I'm looking on the international stage, then I look at Iran. And what you're seeing, in spite of the condemnation, as I said, from European countries or many countries, that are either taking a measured or restrained approach to America's intervention in Iran. Nevertheless, Trinidad and Tobago has not. And we have benefited, there's no question about it. There's a report on how much price of oil and gas has shot through the window, has gone really high. And
yeah, the Gulf itself, oil tankers have basically, they slowed down their activity. Some tankers might be running the risk with their transponders off, but it's essentially an active war zone right now. So to think, you know, the majority of the world's oil is going to have to transit through a choke point in the seas where there's active engagement, munitions flying, not like what happened with Venezuela and how the Americans acted in Venezuela. This is far more wider reaching and dangerous.
Very much so. In fact, when you look at the data, the Strait of Hormuz, which is what Tehran has now blockaded,
yes.
Over 20% of the oil and the energy, which we are an energy economy, is being prevented from passing through the strait to go to the international markets. And what that has meant for Trinidad and Tobago is that the price of oil and gas has significantly increased, and we are an energy-based economy. So if we want to see why we would want to give support to America's position in Iran, well, the story is simple. I mean, we are benefiting. And aligning ourselves with America's position has meant that I'm looking actually to see Middle East crisis pushes up oil prices. And we're looking at that as well. But this is not the article. There's an article, you know, AI pulls together a number of articles and let you know what the position is regarding the oil and gas prices. In any event, the oil and gas prices have gone up significantly, and that is good for us because our revenue is largely dependent on the price of oil and gas.
But ironically, one of the things I think that goes to a point where we can't necessarily, you know, how long will something like this last, right? To what extent this is going to benefit us in the long run. It is America's interest usually for the price of oil and gas to not be too high. So if it gets to extraordinary high levels, they themselves will put things in place to kind of bring it back down.
Well, you know what they've said about that? What they've said about that is that usually exactly what you're saying is true, but America has learned some of its lessons from previous experiences. So one, they have shale oil production,
right? Yes, true.
Which they did not have previously. And secondly, what they have done now, there's far more storage or far more. They have far more oil and gas on reserves, so that they've actually made the point in one of the articles I read. They actually made the point that America is in a different position from many other countries where they'll be able to sustain itself through the long term because it has taken measures to offset the increase in price of oil and gas, which eventually, as you said, normally does not bode well for America. This time America seems to be prepared that they're going in for the long run.
I think one of these things is a lot of these things, in my mind, they are wider strategic implications with regards to international politics, international economic partnerships, right? Disrupting Venezuela's regime and Iran's regime also disrupts those oil supply deals to certain other countries. And it's a bit of a forced realignment now. So, and part of it is, yeah, I guess everyone seems to be a little bit more willing to be more aggressive with how they do these things as opposed to having a lot more patience and relying on diplomacy in the past. Why this is so? Well, part of it is the U.S. is more aggressive somewhat unilaterally, but I'm not sure if it's completely limited only to that. Europe is a little bit nervous with regards to what's going on in the East,
yeah, because
for example.
They had an example. They just had the recent experience with the blowing up the pipeline between Eastern Europe and what's the
Russia?
Yes, and so they got clearly are very vulnerable. America is not as vulnerable as many of these countries are, and the difference is America has taken steps to safeguard its position, which is previously would have affected it, that in the long term they could not sustain their position. But it seems to me that Donald Trump, the president, seems to be very much focused on keeping oil and gas prices high. And that is just one example of that. And how has that benefited us? I was looking for the article, but it has said that, of course, oil and gas prices have gone up significantly. I think Minister Munilal, we are the beneficiary. We didn't cause the fight in the invasion in Iran. We are not part of that, but certainly we are the beneficiary of that, and we are not going to complain. So that we have found that for Trinidad and Tobago, aligning itself with United States geopolitics has been to our benefit, because we have benefited from the increase in oil and gas prices. I'm looking for the actual, let me see, then you probably will be able to
Is this
find
what the minister's statements on it? Or?
Well, not the only minister's statement, but you also have actual data showing how the Middle East crisis pushes up oil prices. Well, they talk about inflation. And they're talking about how the price of oil and gas has gone up significantly since the invasion by the United States and Israel into Iran. So that's one of the things that I think the government is aware of, and has taken, has decided to align itself with the United States in spite of the international condemnation. The other thing too is regionally.
Yes.
Regionally, CARICOM. They're talking about the zone of peace. The Prime Minister, we talked about this off air, was in St. Kitts and made a speech which was published in the newspapers, saying that essentially saying that Trinidad and Tobago was done contrary to what was being said, was done a zone of peace, and therefore Trinidad and Tobago could not take that position. But what is meant by a zone of peace? You know, it's talking about the gangs and all of that. We've had that issue. I don't think that's what they mean when they talk about a zone of peace, you know. My understanding of a zone of peace as a regional bloc is that you want to take a position of neutrality. You're too vulnerable, you're too small. You can't get involved in the international fight between these sparring international superpowers. So what do? You take a position of neutrality. You take a position of sovereignty. I understand that to be the zone of peace, and we are a zone of peace. We are not getting involved in the fight or the sovereignty or the issues, political issues, because we are far too small. But for the Prime Minister to take the zone of peace to talk about the gang, we had gangs. Look at Jamaica. Jamaica's worse than we are. You want to talk about zone of peace? Jamaica has a serious problem with gangs.
But my thing though is even CARICOM's position was not necessarily one of neutrality. And one of the issues
What do you mean by that?
Because it seemed as though they wanted to at least present publicly a front of, we do not agree with what America is doing and want it to stop. I don't know if that's necessarily a position of neutrality.
Well, it's better than getting yourself involved and saying, we are taking the American position, blow up the boats, you write to blow up the boats, and then talking about the narco-terrorists and talking about the... I listened to that speech. I didn't only read his speech, but I listened to what the Prime Minister said, and you had said, contrary to my previous knowledge, that it seemed very much more tempered.
Well, it's an opinion. I'll say it's an opinion. I wouldn't say that my statement is an objective fact. But compared to some of her statements on CARICOM and the zone of peace and transnational crime, and particularly when you go to the kill them all statement that she made, you know, her presentation at CARICOM was far more tempered than that. Now, it was still, I guess you could say, it was interesting how she was more than willing to broach a topic that obviously would be controversial with that forum, in that setting. And it's not just controversial, it was confrontational, right?
You know what she said? Prime Minister of regional countries who vex laws. I listened to it. And my view of it is, she didn't write that speech, it was written for her. And the reason why I took that position, it lacked, all due respect to the Prime Minister and her embassy and the Foreign Affairs, it's very puerile, it lacked any complexity, any real analysis. You are now going to take a very kind of, I mean, all due respect to Mr. Rubio, I not want to get into their politics, but you know, very much a childlike analysis. These people are narco-terrorists. We've got to stop the narco-terrorists from invading our country. That is exactly what America's playbook has been saying. And then when you finish with that, then you go after Cuba. Cuba's situation is far more complex than you are speaking about. And it's as if Mr. Rubio, who definitely has an issue with Cuba, had written that. and it lacked the independence, it lacked the analysis, it lacked the gravitas that you expect of a leader. So you don't want your leader to mimic exactly what the United States wants you to say. I think you need to be more measured. I think you need to be a little more independent. You don't have to take a strong position against, it would be foolhardy if you take a strong position against the United States. But if I read that speech, which I listened to, and she talked about her son when he was born in Barbados, and how he's trying to apply to law school, and he's having problems because he doesn't have a Trinidad and Tobago pass visa, he has a Bajan visa. She lived 14 years in Venezuela. Oh, I mean,
Barbados?
No, she lived 40 years in Jamaica.
Oh, sorry.
Then after 40 years in Jamaica, she lived in Barbados, where her only son was born, and her son has applied to the law school. Listen to her, and how he now, the irony of it is now he's applying to go to the law school, and his visa or his whatever he has is Barbadian. So she's trying to show that there is a relationship with other CARICOM countries, with wholeness, especially Prime Minister of Jamaica. And obviously all those nice things that she did say, then she just went down the road. And down the road was, I have been very condemning of the previous administration dealing with the drug trade in this country, because there clearly is an issue with that. But is she going about it the right way? Is she showing a camaraderie or support of other CARICOM countries? Because it just seems to me as if what she's saying is if the U.S. Embassy gave her that speech to read and don't question it. We don't ask you to question it, You just say what we just said. We said Cuba is, and what she condemned Cuba. I mean, as I said, I do not want to get involved in the politics of the United States. Far be it for me to do that. But when I listened to her, and I listened to what she said, they gave her that speech to read, and she read it, and she did not question it.
Or she said what she thought they wanted her to say.
Well, okay, whatever it is, whatever it was, it lacked any sort of analysis that you would expect from someone as the Prime Minister. And it is something that if I were in the U.S. Embassy and I was part of United States foreign policy, I'd be very pleased with what she said. So where does that come back to the economy? So we started with Iran, and it has been a positive thing for us, because Trinidad and Tobago, aligning itself with the United States, has been very beneficial. The price of oil and gas has gone up significantly, and we have benefited.
But also, it seems as though we have the OFAC licenses being...
Right, so this is the other thing
as well as potential security alliances. But the flip side to that is we saw the heavy-handed approach of the end of last year. It's not sustainable, and now it's gone, and right now we're by ourselves again.
Right, so we went to the international thing and how it benefits us. Now we go into the region, where she says, we are not a zone of peace, and she says, if it touch Guyana, it touch, What kind of talk is that? What kind of talk? We could talk, leave that to America. And she said, so Trinidad and Tobago was threatened, and we are still threatened by Venezuela. And she talked about the narco dictator. All that language, is so unnecessary.
I found that to be one of the interesting things she said, because then the U.S. just go in, remove Maduro, and change the dynamics in Venezuela. So to say that it's still a threat, what do you mean by saying that?
Well, that is what I'm saying. I do not want to get involved in whether what she's saying is based on the truth, but what I will say is it does not have, it's very superficial. It is very much as if this is what we want you to say, and this is what you're going to say. She said, we cannot be a zone of peace when you have a narco dictator who imprisoned and killed thousands of civilians and opposition men. How is she saying those things?
Well, I think part of it too is we look at the OFAC licenses and say, all right, Dragon and Coquina. But if we are still saying Venezuela is a threat, now, forgive me, maybe I'm wrong, but outside of the side of Coquina that's ours, the rest of that is Venezuela's, including the entirety of Dragon. So if we want this OFAC license for Dragon to mean anything, we have to work with Venezuela.
Yeah, but you have to work with the United States, because...
Right, but saying Venezuela is still a threat and being somewhat antagonistic against them, I don't know if that's the best way to start that.
No. And
relationship.
Okay, so that's a lot of brinkmanship. If I had to make a decision about where I would want to land on, I land in the United States, because what I'm seeing happening in the United States, America is winning. America is allowing letting its international oil companies and go back into to Venezuela and to do business. And we, at this point in time, Venezuela has become very quiet. And to me, it seems as though on the face of it, that the position that America has taken regarding Venezuela and being able to have access to the oil and gas seems to be reaping benefits, and Trinidad is benefiting from that. How do we benefit? For two things: tariff relief. Many countries still are paying significant tariffs, and we have and the downstream industry in Trinidad and Tobago, where you talk about the fertilizer business, we no longer have to pay, and Proman is very happy about that. OFAC, we have had an extension of the OFAC license. Venezuela can say what it wants. The former Minister of Energy was able to get a 30-year lease from Venezuela to allow us to monetize the natural gas in the Dragon Field, which is a 4.3 trillion cubic feet of gas. It doesn't matter what Venezuela says. What it matters is that if America puts sanctions, because if America puts sanctions on Venezuela, Shell and all its international oil companies will not do business with Venezuela. And so that the lifting of the OFAC restriction and sanction is significant benefit to Trinidad and Tobago, because we are an energy sector. So coming back to where I had started, I believe that part of this government's approach in terms of its revitalizing the economy is multi-pronged, and part of that is aligning itself with the United States regarding on the international stage, which is Iran, and aligning itself on the regional stage with regard to Venezuela. And on the face of it, it seems to be bearing fruit.
Well, I would say one thing. It seems more to be aligning itself with the current U.S. administration.
Right.
Because as you pointed out in our conversations yesterday, and others have pointed out in the national media forums, what happens when Trump's term in office is over?
Yes.
That relationship is not going to be quite the same. And if there's major policy shifts, we might come out worse for it.
Yes, it may not be as robust, but when Biden was there, one of the big issues that Biden eventually gave some sort of leeway, and that's because pressure was put on it by regional governments, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines, was that America at first had said you can pay in cash, no, sorry, in kind, not cash, and that was a Biden position. And they were able to persuade him to give them a 6-month period in which they could renegotiate the OFAC license. I think that Mr. Trump, President Trump, has been consistent in his approach to foreign policy. He's very robust in his approach. But even if you read what is going on in Iran, they're saying that even the both parties, even the Democrats, have not exactly condemned America's invasion of Iraq, as they did not condemn America's invasion of Iraq. So what I would say with coming back to the economy, I would say that we have decided, that is our government has decided, our best interest lies with the United States, and you see evidence of that both with Iran, and you see evidence of that with the Caribbean composition and the Prime Minister's most recent statement in St. Kitts, where she talked about the narco-terrorists and, you know, that America basically giving full-fledged bellicose support to the United States regarding its position with the so-called terrorists and narco-terrorists, and also going against Cuba, which we have traditionally given some level of support in this region. So that's the decision the government has made. Then against that now, taxes. My goodness gracious. This is now the domestic. Domestic. My goodness gracious, what we have not seen in taxes. You call it fiscal diversification. I would call it fiscal because I was looking at the number of taxes, over 60 taxes. You name it, they have taxes. Birth certificate, either they've increased the taxes or introduced new taxes. And of course, the worst of all of that, as far as I'm concerned, is the transfer tax, which is HEC. And it's very, you know, remember we talked about this, how Minister Lee seemed not to know.
Not to know what was going on and vocalize such that plainly to the press, which to me was, regardless of why he did it, I found it was something that was crazy to do. It was just crazy to do. Don't admit such things to the press and to the public.
I think he was very, well, that's my personal view, which I cannot support with anything, but I do think that he was not happy with the way in which it was managed, that he was the minister who responsible for the HCC houses, and apparently the previous fee when you wanted to change ownership was a flat fee of $700. Now it has changed. And HCC, these are the persons who are the most vulnerable in our society. That is why they qualify for HCC house. You don't qualify HCC house unless your income is below a certain figure. So you are talking about the most vulnerable, the most at-risk persons, and these are the persons who have now decided to tax again.
Because in theory, it's supposed to prevent people from profiting off of these arrangements, but the flip side is the cure is going to harm unintended victims.
And then what you talk about profit, I mean, then scrap it then. Scrap the HCC, because if you're going to say the HCC policy is there to benefit private sector and persons who want to buy these properties and benefit, I'm sure that is true for some, but it's not true for most. And so these are the taxes that they have put in place. They have the so-called inheritance tax. That is when you die and you are transferred ownership to whoever is your heir or beneficiary, they must pay 5% of the original purchase price. So that, I mean, if the market price is current market price is higher, obviously 5% is going to be less. If the original price is higher, obviously it's going to be higher. But nevertheless, it's 5% of the original purchase price when you transfer ownership to the successor upon the death of the owner. Then there's a 10% resale fee. A 10% fee based on the original purchase price is applied when a homeowner sells the HCC property. So you're never supposed to uplift yourself. You're never supposed to have ownership in a property that is not an HCC property. You are supposed to live your life in owning HCC property.
Except they're charging you to do that.
What?
Because if you, in theory, I see where you're coming from. The two policies are kind of like working against each other. One is saying you can't sell it, and the other one is saying we're going to charge you a fee for passing it on.
And 10%, and I actually gave you the breakdown of what that means, and it's a lot. And then there's a 10-year prohibition. The policy reportedly prohibits the transfer of HCC units within the first 10 years of ownership. And the original position was, as I said, was $700, a flat fee of $700. And so that is one of the many, many taxes that this government, I call it fiscal diversification, because there is an article in one of the newspapers that breaks down the kind of new taxes, not only in terms of motor vehicle taxes, which I think most of us are.
Oh, fine. But when you kind of broaden your perspective, yes, it's a fine, but the intent is to extract money from the population.
And this is what it is. It's an article in the Guardian, government new penalty fines. It kicks in on January 1st. And this is what it said: birth and death registration fees rise. Fees for registering birth and death will increase. Registration for a child over 3 months, but under 12 months will cost $40, while registration over 12 months will be from $100 to $150. Other fees include $20 for declaring a birth in another district, correcting errors in the register, a certified copy of the entries. Then you have the custom duties updates. Standard custom fees have been doubled.
Yes.
Charges previously.
This is a big one.
Right, so we talk about, everybody's been touched. Everybody's been touched. Charges previously set at $40 will rise to $80. Containing examination station are also increasing sharply, with one category going from $375 to $750, another from $525 to $1,050.
This is on top of when your stuff is stuck at the port because they can't clear it, you have to pay them to hold your stuff because they can't clear it, not because you don't want to take it.
New rules also target vehicle imports, commercial compressed natural gas vehicles with engines up to 1,599 cc. Both new and used will receive full exemptions, but private electric vehicles valued at $400,000 or less will receive a 10% reduction in customs duty. At the same time, the maximum age for imported vehicles moved from 3 to 8 years. Farmers got obliged, traffic fines and PBR tolls. The government doubled more traffic fines under the Motor Vehicle and Traffic Act, effective January 1st. Under the new schedule, fines set at $1,000 have increased to $2,000, from $750 to $50 and doubled. And the repeat offenders now carry tiered penalties that be. So you're getting it, the priority bus routes, you're getting it on the traffic offences, you're getting it on births and deaths, you're getting it also on land, the surcharge. you know, the owner of property, the surcharge.
Or the landlord surcharge.
Landlord surcharge. You also have the banks now having to pay a surcharge.
You also have the price of natural gas to the downstream industries going up.
By what a significant amount. So
I think it's 70%, 60%,
I was about to say
custom
that,
and excise duties on alcohol, so that is both imported and locally produced alcohol. So the prices already, I believe, by now all of those price increases should have come into effect.
Right. So what is the because we talk about the economy, right? So this is it seems to me that the government has decided we need to diversify the economy. We don't have time. 2-3 years has taken a long time. Let us tax them. Tax the people of this country. So again, we have an article written, From Taxes of Foreign Exchange, Why Business are Shutting Down. I'm sure we've read that Trinidad Cement Limited has shut down one of its operations. Nutrien has shut down its operations in Trinidad, going towards potash, and Proman has now seemed to have replaced them in the production of ammonia and urea. But local businesses have been bearing the brunt of economic decline in Trinidad and Tobago, with many being forced to close or downsize their operation. In response to questions from the Express, heads of business chambers said the situation stemmed largely from the operating environment and long-standing structural changes. In any event, they talked about the contributing factors: the landlord business surcharge, the commercial asset levy on financial institutions, electricity surcharge on commercial buildings, the single-use plastic tax, 100% increase in excise and custom duties on alcohol and cigarettes, locally manufactured and imported, 100% increase in port handling of fees and custom processing fees, 100% increase in processing fees for work permits, and they go on, increase in gaming tax and liquor license fees, and they go on with tobacco control and the various legislation. This is also the introduction of an increase in electricity surcharge. So you look at it, they say business opposite. What you're seeing now in Trinidad and Tobago, why the government is going to be seeing, I guess, in the new budget, how they have increased their revenue position. Because
oh yes, they definitely will say that.
They're going to say that, and they also have to, will state too, that they've also increased their revenue position by taxing you. But the taxation has caused the businesses to close down.
Well, that's the best part. The best part is when we get the mid-year budget review, are they going to say it's because of taxes? That's not popular. Are they going to say it's because of the war in the Middle East? Well, what does that have to do with you? But we have seen certain plays in the current government being run that seemingly come straight from their predecessors' playbook, right? Or the IMF report was so great. Oh, look, the deficit is so low. Is that the real deficit? We didn't budget the 10% increase and the back pay in the budget for why? So I have no doubt that the current Minister of Finance is going to do what his predecessor did and say, look how great things worked out. We're so smart. All it takes is another country to wage war on another country, and all of our economic policies will look like genius moves. That's all. Nothing big.
Yeah, but how does they do with the government putting a strategy towards developing the economy? And which brings us, so you look at the fact that, as I said, there's a multi-pronged approach, both on the national, regional stage, and the local stage, all of which is align yourself with the United States and increase your fiscal diversification by taxing everyone, and the consequences of that is
when
a
you
business.
say fiscal diversification, right, that is basically referencing taxes. That is not economic diversification, right? That is not saying, oh, we're going to get new industries to find new sources of revenue and new sources of employment, which is, I think, at some point, that's something to touch on as well.
Right, and in fact, I think either Moody's or Standard & Poor's did make a comment on that and did recommend that the government, in its strive to increase its revenue position, they use the term, I'm subject to being corrected, fiscal diversification. But then we look at now and see what are the consequences, whether you're hearing from the local market how businesses are slowing down or businesses are closing. And let's look at Standard & Poor's. I'm going to mention it very briefly again. As of March 2026, which is just this month actually, Standard & Poor's and Moody's maintain a negative outlook, and primarily due to concerns over fiscal sustainability. What I mean, taxes, fiscal sustainability, declining foreign exchange reserves, and a slow pace of economic, not fiscal, economic diversification. So those are the key reasons: fiscal management and sustainability. They're saying that they have lacked limited effectiveness of long-standing efforts to strengthen fiscal management and boost growth. They talk about taxes, you know, foreign exchange shortages, stagnant economic diversification, debt and financing pressures, where we have borrowed over, I think, $1 billion US on the international market, and the external buffer for that is a Heritage and Stabilization Fund. Institutional constraints. We don't have a TTRA. I think that was unfortunate. The government, if it is it really is committed to ensuring that persons pay the taxes that they should pay, especially the business community pays the right amount of taxes. Certainly closing down or not giving the institutional framework in order to do that would to me to be a negative. So what they're saying is that behind all of this, Standard & Poor's has not given us a positive outlook. And what is also telling IMF, now originally when the IMF's report was published, what we saw was that the IMF sees signs of economic recovery in Trinidad and Tobago. That was what the original, I don't know if you noticed that.
Are you speaking about the ministry's press release?
That's correct.
So it wasn't really the IMF's press release.
But who knows that though? Who in the public is going to make that distinction?
Right.
Right?
And again, this is something we've seen from the previous administration. Oh, look how great everything is.
Right. Except, of course, after having given a wonderful report on the economy and that the economy was recovering, then we see that the IMF, and that's the official report, which is supposed to come out in the middle of this year, gives a completely different story, and I'm trying to pick it up. They have said the growth is less than 1%. Mm-hmm. Let me see
I think this year it might be 1.2%.
Look what they said. They said that the International Monetary Fund, which concluded its 2026 Article 4 mission in February of this year, confirmed that while Trinidad and Tobago economy is undergoing a gradual recovery, it faces a period of moderated growth and significant fiscal. You know what fiscal is? Taxes, huh? So what are the major problems? Sustained growth. Real GDP growth is projected to moderate to 0.7%. And that, by the way, is not the regional growth rate of about 3%. Fiscal deficit discrepancy. Fiscal, again, is the tax. The IMF projects a fiscal deficit of 5% on GDP for year 2026, which is more than double the government's target of 2.2%. Declining reserves. Foreign reserves are projected to drop to 4.6 billion by the end of 2026, approximately 5.4 months of import cover, continuing a steady decline from previous years. Public debt. And the core challenges, energy sector weaknesses, foreign exchange shortages, fiscal consolidation risk. So that what you're getting from the IMF, what you're getting from Standard & Poor's, and what you're getting from Moody's is not a good story. And it's a negative story in terms of what is the outlook for Trinidad and Tobago and what the IMF...
Yeah, if you read one of the concluding statement, yes, it looks positive, some of the language, but they're pointing to labor force participation needs to improve. They're pointing to diversification needs to improve. They're pointing to some of the severe risks in the short term. They seemingly want to say that there's confidence in medium to long-term things turning around. But the oil and gas sector and lack of diversification and the revenue position and the deficit, the debt position, the growing debt, all of these things they have pointed to. And given the fact that you're not necessarily seeing a lot of paths to solve these things anytime soon, it's no wonder that they said, well, in the short term, there's significant risk of things being bad.
Because what they're saying, the growth projection is not good. It's less than 1%. And that is not a regional norm. The regional average is about 3%. Also, when you talk about labor force participation rate, it's very noteworthy when you go to CSO and you look at what the labor force participation was at Q1 of 2025, meaning how many people were participating in the economy so that you could determine what the unemployment rate really was. It was about 55.7%. It has dropped by Q3, the third quarter when this government came into office, by I think less than 54%. And the persons who most affected are the women, and it makes you wonder if that is because of CPAP, because I don't think it's any secret that many of the people who are employed in the CPAP program, which is employment, and it is when they are determining what is the employment figure, CPAP URP is included in determining the data for the employment rate in Trinidad and Tobago. And many of the persons they're saying who have been affected by that are the females. So What you're saying is that the labor force participation rate is, the outlook is not positive. What you're saying is the Standard & Poor's, the outlook for Trinidad and Tobago within the next 6 to 24 months, both Moody's and Standard & Poor's is giving us a negative outlook. What you're saying is IMF has shown that it has Trinidad and Tobago with a decline in the growth position in Trinidad, labor force participation rate in Trinidad and Tobago, and in the debt position of Trinidad. It's all not a good story. It's all not a good story. And behind all of that, what makes everything even worse, the backdrop to all of that, is what you had spoken when I was coming on the show, is the crime. You talked about the state of emergency, and what is very noteworthy, at least what I had read, what's the difference between this current state of emergency and the previous one? Well, this one does not focus on curfew. This one focuses on social media platforms and criticism of the government. And let me see if I can pick it up. This is what it said. What does the state of emergency mean for you? Again, this is coming from The Guardian, and it's yesterday's papers actually, so it's very recent. And what they're saying is social media and public statements. What is that saying? That the government is not prepared to be criticized. If you ever want to talk, you talk about Cuba, that is what Cuba is about. You are not allowed to criticize the government. That is a hallmark of a dictatorship. And yet in this country, we are using the legislation not to reduce curfews, but look what it said, while there is no curfew at this time, the regulations grant sweeping powers that could affect social media use, protests, police searches, and detention. They're not sounding to you like a dictatorship? I'm not saying it is. I'm saying that when you want to criticize Cuba, you have to look at your own backyard and see whether you are doing the same thing. Because that that lady, they couldn't charge her under the State of Emergency Act because I think they had repealed it. The ZOSA collapsed, which the Prime Minister criticized the independent senators and even indicated that 2 of them had been approached to support it if they were prepared to give financial backing. They were going to get financial backing from the government if they support the ZOSA. She did not say who they were, but she definitely implied that the independent bench of senators were less than looking after, let's put it that way, the interest of the people of this country. So what they're saying is now the state of emergency powers, they do not focus so much on, they don't so much focus on curfews, but they focus on social media. That lady who criticized the government from Diego Martin, when they could not charge, as far as I could see, under the State of Emergency Act, because that had been either repealed, but it was not effective, ZOSA had collapsed, they went on the Sedition Act. It seems to me that this is what they say, these regulations do not specifically mention social media, but they contain broad language that can apply to online platforms. It's an offense to endeavor, orally or otherwise, influence public opinion in a manner likely to be prejudicial to public safety. That's a very broad statement. And if you want to look at that independently, it sees that we are shutting down any criticism of the government and of the government ministers. And if you want to go after them, we are going to use the powers given to us, either under the Sedition Act or under the State of Emergency legislation, to detain or take whatever steps that we consider to be relevant. They said the wording can extend to posts, videos, or messages shared online. It is also an offense to have any article in your possession with the intent of making or facilitating such an endeavor. And also could include a mobile phone, computer, or other electronic device. I mean, this is pretty serious. Protest, gathering, and movement. Why are we not seeing, with all the unhappiness or the disruption in the society, people say, why are people not protesting? Why are people not marching? Well, that is what the Constitution, the freedom of expression and freedom of movement. This is what the state of emergency regulations provide. All the word protest does appear in the regulation. The powers granted can affect public demonstrations and gatherings. The Commission of Police may restrict a person's association with others and require a person to leave a specific place or prohibit them from entering certain areas. Any location can be designated a protected place. Entering such a place without authorization is an offense, and police may search or remove anyone found there. Then they can make warrantless, make searches, and use police powers without a warrant. if that does not look as though we are heading towards a dictatorship in this country, I don't know what else is. So ZOSA failed, ZOSA collapsed, and now we have the state of emergency using regulation to silence criticism of this government, clearly from what I have read to you, using the powers of detention, using the ability to prevent persons from gathering and protesting. And so we have with that crime, which foreign direct investors coming to this country? When you read Standard & Poor's, when you read Moody's, when you read IMF, and then you look at what is happening in this country, which foreign direct investor is going to put its investment in this country when it's clearly an undercurrent in this country where people are not free to express their views? And in fact, with the recent competition for the competition, it was alleged, and in the papers, it's on my view, it was alleged that many of the performers, calypsonians, who had made calypsos which were critical of the government, did not make it into the second round. All of this together is sending a message that the constitutional rights that are entrenched in our economy, in our country, democracy, are being infringed, or at least they're being whittled away. So it doesn't help. It does not help that the regulations that they are implementing in the state of emergency seem to go after. Don't say anything on social media.
Yeah.
Do not post anything on social media, because you may end up like the lady in Diego Martin, who now said, "I'm so sorry for what I said." Then
I would just like to know, so if you have a UNC supporter saying all the PNM should be insert a violent act here, is that going to be included because that's public safety?
Absolutely.
Because I don't have an issue if you want to do something to curtail some of the ridiculous excesses of comments, of violent comments on social media.
I agree with you.
But then again, this is so open-ended. I can't say that that's the full intention of this.
And I think that is what the fear is. And I agree with you. And let me just say for the record, I absolutely agree that no person should use a platform, a social media platform, to go after the government and to encourage persons to, in fact, attack the government or the ministers or the persons who uphold our national security. I would absolutely not agree with that. But it seems to me, slowly and inexorably, that the government is not willing to accept or to tolerate any criticism of what it is doing, and it's using powers given to it under the state of emergency, because the ZOSA collapsed in order to ensure that. And that is not good for foreign direct investment, because that's where we started. We started looking at what is the government's approach to the economy, and we look at it being multi-pronged. Tax, 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 aligning yourself with the United States position, whatever that position is, aligning yourself with that position. And now against that background, you have Standard & Poor's, you have Moody's and IMF sending a picture that is not a good picture for Trinidad and Tobago, even in terms of the labor force participation, even in terms of growth. The picture is not a positive one. And the background to all of that is the crime. We look, as I said, we not only have the ZOSA, not only do we have the Sedition Act, but we also have the issue of the body cameras. We have the issue of Brent Thomas. We have the issue of Joshua Samuel. Those issues have not been, as far as I can see, have been addressed by this government, whether it's the Commissioner of Police, the ministers, 2 ministers.
Well, with regards to Brent Thomas, I find the whole situation to be very weird. With regards to Joshua Samaru, they addressed it. Exactly. It was so poor. I don't think anyone that has any legitimate concerns over that situation was satisfied with how it was addressed. So I mean, I could be wrong. That's a very generalized statement. But we do have Diego Martin on the line, so we'll take the call.
Let me say one thing. Can I just say that? So then we have the crime situation, which is the backdrop for foreign direct investment. And then the whole, what's it called? 20,000 jobs. You can't put any trust in what the government says. I've got the article. They said that 20,000 jobs. They have a whole job fair, a whole movement to get people employed. And when they looked at it, it created only 1,800 jobs. How are you going to have trust and confidence in a government when it cannot deliver on its promises? A basic promise that it made to the people of this country that would create employment opportunities. I think they called it they had a term that they used.
Yes,
they used to describe what...
It's an employment drive, I believe it was.
Another two. But in any event, it has been a great failure.
Well, yes, because it was nowhere near 20,000 as far as we're aware.
1,800.
We have to go. Diego Martin on the line, caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean, and to the Honorable ex-Finance Minister, Mrs. Teixeira. Two things. I shifting a little bit away because as a taxpayer, it hurts me to see when the state has to fork out $20 million
Yes.
for the Coleman prosecution. It hurts me when the state has to pay $33 million when somebody botched an affidavit in a Miami court. And I get to right to the point. How did we manage the AG office with respect to that? Because 20 million is only some of it, because we have to pay lawyers. The fact is, there's a term that everybody, some half of the population agree with it, half don't agree. It's for lawyers.
Yeah.
The fact is, the file went missing, and the Honorable Judge Burrow was made a scathing attack how the state handled that. They brought in two ex-judges, one to investigate what happened in the Solicitor General, the AV office. A report was done. They said, okay, we have to make some changes. And then they bring in an ex-judge. And he recommended that we appeal, and we appeal. And he went up straight to the Privy Council, and it comes back to we still have to pay. So we fork out a lot of money paying those lawyers. When will the LATT stand up and sanitize their organization? Because too many times we have people supposedly SC's attorney. I'm not an attorney, doing things that I suspect could be, I'm putting it quote unquote, nefarious to make a money. To me, that is one of the issues. Because that one of those same judges had an investigation into a chairman of Angostura for alleged misconduct with respect to females. And he ended up also saying it is a good boy. He didn't touch it. So that tells me something is wrong. And I'm going back to the LATT. The LATT was slammed by the courts for going after an MP who was an attorney, and I'll call his name, Mr. Rambali, because they wanted to discipline him and they come down hard at him. He took it to the appeal court, and the LATT come back and tell us what they're doing. They have to show that they're concerned with what is going on. I mean, so when the Prime Minister say we are at lawless dump, everybody basically, but we reach a stage that hard action has to take place. And I would juxtapose that with the Brent Thomas issue. I am hearing now, and I'm seeing and I'm reading about the man who signed off on it was the former Commissioner of Police. That is the one saying you don't take instruction, it is only taken advice. So apparently he was taking instructions from junior police officers. One of them say they were surveilling the band. I want to know if they're surveilling. They could have picked him up in the airport. They could have picked him up in Ghana, but they wait for a friendly nation, the Barbados, to do the things. Now, if he was so notorious, why did they not put it on the Interpol watch list? You would have gotten help. You know why they couldn't put it on Interpol watch list? Then a lot of questions would have been answered, and you would have to show the information. The fact is, you get 6 warrants. Apparently, our police don't know the effectiveness, how to execute warrants. You take 6 of them and you went to Barbados. And the Prime Minister of Barbados say, she says warrants and warrants and warrants. She didn't do no due diligence too. I mean, she says, from my vantage, you know, I'm questioning her ability. Why are they hiding it? And as the former Commissioner of Police, I really disagree with them. 4 commissioners of police have been investigated Brent Thomas, and we can't get a conclusion of the investigation. That tells us the police service has collapsed. One man can't change it. The whole leadership of the police, I don't know what they're waiting for. But at the end of the day, let me come back to the Attorney General office now. The Attorney General office, recently in Parliament, he said he fired all of them and he's going to do it again. Because he told us one of them was spending half of the time in Scotland and working half of the time and getting a fat pay. But one of the investigations say we have to make changes. The current Attorney General make changes in a different way, change the human resources, because that was the way it operated. It had a culture. So, again, that's all I have to say. I am we're so scared for resources, and we flippantly throwing it away. Again, have a nice morning.
Thank you all. Well, to be fair to McDonald Jacob, he did say two things. One, he was signing off on something, but it wasn't necessarily his authority. And more to the point, certain aspects of that situation required someone from the ministry, in his opinion, either the permanent secretary or the minister. In part, he couldn't authorize the plane, I believe, that was utilized, right? And I think he signs off on certain things, but I don't think he could even authorize then Superintendent Suzette Martin to go, right? The police need authorization to travel, and from what I understand, and I could be wrong because it's been a while since I had this conversation, I don't believe the acting commissioner was able to give that authorization. He could have signed off on certain other aspects of the police matter. When you look at the affidavit or what was in the press, the situation seems like a complete mess. And the gift that keeps on giving, it started with the meritless fiasco, once again, and Brent Thomas gets caught up in that. Apparently, there are allegedly multiple investigations into him that they consolidated.
That is true.
And then now, they have these warrants, and I understand why Mia Motley said what she said, but at the end of the day, it seems as though the legitimacy of those warrants did not hold up, either in the Barbadian courts, because they AG said, don't contest it, and our courts.
Yeah, and I think they admitted that, and also too, as the Prime Minister correctly did say, that when there was the judgment, that it was called a kidnapping. So when she uses the word kidnapping, it's not her coming to that conclusion. The court came to that conclusion based on the evidence that was given.
I think the thing is, right, to me, I would not be surprised that one of the reasons why the narrative of the events seems to be somewhat difficult to believe. I wouldn't be surprised if certain people like McDonald Jacobs might not have been told the entirety of the truth. And that's why what he knows is so limited. Because arguably, when it happened, I don't think anybody made a case that procedurally he had to have been centrally involved in this thing. So now, because of a lack of information, we don't necessarily want to speculate on Suzette Martin's, the depth of her involvement and what have you, or who was the person involved that sent her there. But the fact of the matter is, this wasn't some criminal that did a crime and then disappeared into the bushes. The government did a thing with another government. How is it that we have no record? The file disappeared apparently. How is it that we don't know what happened?
They found it?
No, that's the Nipon Kuhlman file. The Brent Thomas file also disappeared now.
Oh, I saw that reported in people.
So I want to know what they mean by disappeared. Did it disappear when Mr. Hines was minister? Did it disappear when Mr. Gonzalez was minister? Although I doubt that, he was only there for a few weeks. Did it disappear under the new administration? When did it disappear? Who did it disappear under? And why is it, I don't know, we're 10 months in, I think, into a new administration. How hard is it? You know at least some of the people who were involved. Can't they give you enough testimony to then lead you to the next step in order to recreate the chain of events? Because it seems as though there's this great big mystery, but we're not talking about unknown anonymous criminals doing something that we can't figure out. We're talking about agents of the state doing something that somehow we can't figure out exactly what happened and why it happened and who did it.
But do you think that the Prime Minister is using this as a political deflection? Because when she spoke at the St. Kitts meeting, she made a lot of, she spoke a lot about the Brent Thomas matter and that she was setting up a commission of inquiry. So it makes you wonder.
Did she say, I don't know if she said she would set it up. I can't remember that.
Well, she spoke about the kidnapping and she spoke about the matter needed to be investigated.
I found it interesting.
Why did she bring it up?
Wanted to hold CARICOM to account when in my mind, listen, CARICOM is very secondary or tertiary to this.
You know why she did that? Because what she was trying to say is the CARICOM is not a united front, and that when she was in opposition and she tried to get information regarding Brent Thomas, the Secretariat of the CARICOM, failed to give her the information,
but
and
now,
to date have not done so.
But
so
now
saying,
she's in government.
Yeah, but she's using that as evidence.
I know, but even regardless of how pertinent it is, the most pertinent aspect of this case is all domestic. And you're the government of the day. And we know where Suzette Martin is.
Yeah.
She's in the police headquarters as the DCP operations, right? Now, I'm not saying she's innocent or guilty. I do find it interesting that she and all is not looking to try to get her name cleared over this because it hangs over her head.
She doesn't mean no one has charged her or with any wrongdoing, so why would she?
Again, how is it that this thing can be done by the states and yet it is so unknown that there's no it's not about charging people. I want a resolution. I want an explanation. How is it that we can't even get that? You can't even say, well, the government of the day wants to hide their skeletons in the closet. It's a whole different government.
But I being a former politician myself, I do the same thing. I'd shut my mouth. Let the media bring it out. Why are you going to do that to start a story going? Obviously, she knows she's being looked at. Obviously, she knows that people are wondering why she's still in that position when she seems to have played a key part in the...
You see that question there? Why is she still in that position? I'll get to that. But we do have to take the call from San Fernando. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Let me start with the state of emergency. I trying to understand why we need a state of emergency. Because according to the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the reason for our crime rate going down and our murder rate going down was the U.S. presence in the Caribbean Sea. So I don't know why we need a state of emergency if it is that she just had to tell Donald Trump put back some boats there. Because according to her, the other states of emergency did nothing to suppress crime. It was Donald Trump. She made that statement in the CARICOM meeting in St. Kitts. So to come now and to bring another state of emergency, I find that pointless. Well, you're telling us the last two didn't make any sense. Now, remember I said to you a while ago, Sean, when they started the state of emergency, I said this is the last tool in the toolbox that they have here. So they seem to have no other idea of how to deal with crime. We have an anti-gang legislation that was passed and enacted in Trinidad and Tobago. And up to now, the police service cannot, and I have to stand by it, and the state cannot deal with gang activity in Trinidad and Tobago. We have an anti-gang legislation.
They have charged,
all we can do...
They have charged one guy under that legislation, as far as I'm aware, since its
That's
inception.
right. All they can do now is have state of emergencies and issue detention, all that stuff to lock up gang leaders, to hold them down. But you're not charging anybody. It seems as if we cannot operate, our police service cannot charge people, they cannot collect evidence. They always talk about, when you listen to them talk, when you listen to anyone, the DCPs talk, and you listen to the commissioner, evidence-led policing. They always talk about that. And intelligence-led policing. Intelligence and evidence policing. But they can't seem to collect evidence to deal with these gangs that they're talking about. They can't collect evidence to deal with these gangs. So what? So now we, the public, have to suffer another state of emergency, another demerit on our international credentials. The state seems to be bereft of any type of ideas to move this economy forward, the government, I'm going to say that. And to bring the devils, as you said, Karen, is in the details. So to say in this emergency regulations here now that you're looking at basically threatening media all media, whether it be social media or the established media, like yourself, Sean. If you read that section 11, it tells you what the intention is. I said this before on 2 previous UNC administrations, Basdeo Pandey and Ilas Kanga Prasad Bisesa. They figured they could use law to suppress the voices of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That's what they want to do, use law. But everybody can see that you all are not doing a good job right now. Nobody wants you all to fail. We want to live in a prosperous and a better Trinidad and Tobago, you know. But you're not going about it the right way. Is this only about staying in power? Because a lot of, if you listen to Mr. Alexander's the Homeland Security, the Homeland Security Minister's utterances, a lot of it is also about suppressing the voices of the people.
Yes.
Or taking away people's rights.
And not about fighting crime.
This is what is happening right now.
And not fighting crime.
It is sad to see that only 11 months into a new administration, that we are into our 3rd state of emergency.
Yeah.
And I have to go back on a statement that I made about that social legislation. I have to now say thank God that didn't pass. I was one of those who was for it in the initial stages when it seems plausible. But that is in everything being equal. But everything is not being equal.
Absolutely.
And you're telling us the only way we could govern here is to suppress the people's rights, and the people's voices. That's what they're telling us right now. Because they're so afraid of what the people are going to say. They're so afraid. It is so ridiculous. This Brent Thomas issue that we're looking at. We don't need, but you have been in power since May 2025. And you tell me you don't have all the information to deal with the issue with Brent Thomas, just to find out who and what and why, and when to go to CARICOM to try and chastise Mia Motley in the CARICOM meeting and the CARICOM secretariat. When you have all the information at your fingertips, because you in charge of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, you standing in the position where you could see everything. But what happens is, with all the politics that are going on, politicians protect their own. And this is just a way to protect the wrongdoers in this Brent Thomas issue by the other side. Because at the end of the day, they always collaborate when it comes to protecting themselves. And I want to say my last thing.
Quick.
In this ferry issue with the Tobago ferry, Tobago cargo ferry, Sean. Did you notice that one of the voices that you didn't hear in this whole issue, who always jumping on everything in Tobago, was Mr. Watson Duke?
Ooh.
Where is Mr. Watson Duke?
Yes.
Where is Mr. Watson Duke, right? But let me say this. It seems as if silence can be bought in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Silence can be bought. And
caller, I'll have to end it there.
I wonder if let me put it this way.
Quick.
I wonder if Mr. Duke get a contract. I'm asking this question. I'm asking. Did Mr. Duke get a contract in any state agency?
Well, he's made up with the
Did Mr. Duke get a contract in any state?
He's call out. Wait.
So I want to find
You're
out.
asking a question.
I know. I'm just saying he's made up with the THA,
Yeah,
so potentially
we could find out. I mean, there's nothing
yeah,
wrong with that.
it may be asking the question. So you, as a journalist, you all could find out. Did Mr. Duke get a contract in a state agency in Trinidad and Tobago recently? I wonder.
Caller.
Have a good day, Karen.
Thank you.
I just want to say something. National recruitment drive. They said of the 30,000 people who applied for the jobs of the government through Employee TT, only 1,801 have been hired by the ministry.
So it was subscribed
to roughly 6%.
It was It was subscribed to. It's not because people didn't want jobs.
Right.
Okay, we lost the caller. All right. Quick. The whole thing about Brent Thomas. If they don't have the information,
they do.
Yes, that is a reasonable statement to make.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying, devil's advocate. If they don't, then wouldn't that be an implication of some sort of obstruction?
Well,
right?
Lawyers, if don't ask a question, you don't know the answer to. So you're not going to push that narrative
Of course not.
If you don't go push that narrative, you don't know the answer already.
I know that, but that's what I'm saying. For us on the outside, what is reasonable? You're the government there, and you don't have, and you apparently don't have all the information. How is that right? How is that?
Well, they want you to know. They want you to know now. They know, but they want you to know.
So here's the thing, and I've said this before, from long before. The state of emergency, it's a shortcut, because they have issues with policy, regulations, and laws around the criminal justice system. So you shortcut all of that by just saying, we don't need to go through certain processes to get warrants and to arrest and to search and all of that, right? We shortcutting things. The problem, of course, is we still can't. All the intelligence that they claim to have, we have so much intelligence, according to intelligence, there's a threat against the state. And one of the things in the state of emergency, so the first state of emergency was a threat against the state. And then the renewal was the high levels of crime. And now this next state of emergency is both threat against the state and the high levels of crime. But the intelligence never, seemingly, turns into evidence for all the wonderful intelligence we have. Why? And to me, that says there's a procedural gap. There's a regulation, legal gap somewhere.
I think what's going on right now, actually, with the regulation and the state, they're very, very, very worried. Because if you ever want to look at a country and look at the beginning of a dictatorship, and I can use Grenada as an example, to be frank with you, I did go to Grenada just as Maurice Bishop, just before, maybe a month before Maurice Bishop was executed. And you could palpably feel the tension in Grenada, and people that I knew were afraid to speak. If you want to control a country, if you want to control a narrative, you threaten people with charges against them under nothing more draconian than your state emergency. And what is very frightening to me is that this government can no longer use the issue of crime, because according to them, they fought the battle and they've won. But according to them, the percentages go, I mean, that's what the Commissioner of Police has said. And now you're using the state of emergency to shut down dissent, to shut down one of the major indicators of a democracy, which the Prime Minister should recognize when she talks about Cuba. What Cuba cannot do is there can be no dissent. What you're trying to do in this country is not only the traditional media, as you are doing right now, but the people who go on the social, the TikTok, the Reels, and give their views. You are shutting down the rights of these people of this country to criticize the government, and that is a very, very worrying. And by the way, coming back to the economy, it goes back to foreign direct investment. I wouldn't be coming in a hurry.
We have Arima on the line. Quick last call. Arima, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning to the panel. Good morning to the panel.
Good morning.
My thought process is very simple, and I am of the opinion that the Brent Thomas file went missing under this administration, and I will tell you why. Because early in the administration's history for this year, the Attorney General made a decision to no contest the case against Brent Thomas. And what would he have done? Not peruse the file in order to make that decision? That is my two cents with my understanding about how a file is used and the decision being made to drop the case against him. Thank you.
Thank you.
But why would he want to do that? I'm just asking. I'm asking, we're theorizing.
What do you
here.
mean?
Why would they want the
I don't know.
Yeah,
but if the file was missing from before, they spoke about the matter publicly when they not just dropped the case but also apologized to him. So if it is that the file was missing but somehow they were unaware while being engaged with the case publicly, I find that also very weird. So I can't help but agree with the caller, because it just makes no sense that the AG is going to now look into the situation and somehow the file is missing. And they don't know it because they didn't say anything about it then. Unless, and this is, so it's the file went missing under their watch or the file went missing under the PNM's watch, but they didn't, for whatever strange reason, didn't want to admit it. The problem, of course, is none of these scenarios are good scenarios, right? But we're kind of caught in a logic track of, well, it has to be one or the other. If they didn't say anything about Brent Thomas publicly, and now the first thing they said was, well, the file is missing. That's a little bit more understandable. But they apologized to the man, they looked into the case, he said we dropped the charges. So I have to agree with the caller. There's something is not adding up. We just don't know what side of the equation is not adding up.
I suspect they do, though.
Well, of course they do.
Yeah,
of course they do. One of the things I want to say this, and this might be one of the most upsetting thoughts I've had with regards to the police situation. First of all, it seems as though in this country, accountability based on principles. So you have a principle, therefore you apply it equally, the standards apply equally. Accountability based on principle is not something that's practiced regularly. And then now when you go to the TTPS and how it seems the whole situation was set up, but also combined with what it has devolved into post the meritless fiasco, post the arrest of Ayla fiasco, and also the culture of the police service itself and the police executive itself as it has evolved or de-evolved over years. I do not have confidence that you could hold the police service to proper accountability anymore.
Well, you know a good example of that? The body camera issue. I don't know if you followed that.
Of course.
You have the Commissioner of Police saying that we ordered X amount, thousands of body cameras, but we were able to use 180, and the reason for that is the nature of the contract. And the nature of the contract is that they are tied to the purchase of the body cameras is a maintenance component, so that they have to be able to maintain it. Then you had the former Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffith, as I understood it, saying that is the norm, that these contracts have a maintenance provision, and that the reason why they haven't been able to put these body cameras on the market and make it available to the police is because it requires these body cameras to be maintained by the police service. And then you have the current Commissioner of Police saying, I don't understand that. He said we have enough police officers within the police service that are quite capable of maintaining these cameras. So what you see is the whole issue with Zosa, remember, came up with the body cameras. The Joshua Samru issue was the body cameras. And all of a sudden you have both the Commissioner of Police, the current and the past, giving you excuses as to why the body cameras, which this government has paid for, are not available. All of this goes, the Brent Thomas issue, the Joshua Samru issue, all of the issues go to the question of whether we can have trust and confidence in the people who we put in place to run the national security in this country. You add to that the regulation, which is very concerning. When you shut down dissent, when you shut down criticism of a government, what you are dealing with is you are leading towards, you know, A.N.R. Robinson said this, streams turn into rivers and so on and so on. You have to be very careful that when you start going down that path, that you're putting the democracy of your country at risk. And of anything that's come out of this state of emergency, more than the, I guess, the detention, that is very concerning, but the fact that people feel that they are not able to express their views and criticize this government. That's what they have done. And you have said this too, the Prime Minister is not available. Why hasn't she spoken in public and answered the question?
More importantly, when you have various issues where people have significant questions, and whether fair or unfair, they inherited a situation where the public no longer has a lot of benefit of the doubt to give, right? With regards to the TTPS as well, the Commission inherited a police service where trust and confidence is so low, the benefit of the doubt is not going to be forthcoming by the public. It does not help that you have situations like this censorship of Calypsonians, the new regulation, how the Commissioner and the Minister of Homeland Security responded to the Joshua Samru shooting, how TTT and the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister responded to the Calypso Monarch Mike incident, right? So you have these situations where the narrative, the government or the authorities are not doing a good job explaining themselves reasonably to put the issue to bed. Right? Maybe because they can't. But the point I'm trying to make is, isn't this the time when the big Hefe, who commanded the most votes in the national election, who holds the most cachet with the population, now is the time for you, in order to keep your party from falling any lower, to step forward, to use your political might and your brain power and your charisma and your speaking ability to say something, anything beyond insulting the Calypsonians after this situation happens. That is your defense. What, I can't remember what's the word. But they kind of like cause themselves to be disregarded because of their hateful whatever. Like, that is not effective. It goes back to, you could criticize CARICOM if there's legitimate criticisms, but why does it have to be so aggressive? You're not mending bridges on fences. You're widening chasms. And which to me, I didn't have as much issues with the Prime Minister's presentation to CARICOM, but a lot of what I had more issues with was ironically not what she said to CARICOM about CARICOM, but what she said about our local situation, including, well, you need to be a leader for all your people, including the members of the opposition. And I just felt you saying that with a straight face. And
absolutely.
I do not feel that being practiced at all.
And you know what amazed me is when the Prime Minister said, and interfering with the politics of countries, going into places like St. Vincent, going into places, but I don't know if you mentioned St. Lucia.
Yeah, because the whole situation with Ralph Gonsalves.
The UNC is the one that people believe were interfering with the internal politics of those countries, and you will now say that is something that you are going to condemn. The Prime Minister, sorry to say this, the Prime Minister has squandered her credibility. She has really, if the Prime Minister went to take all due respect to her, for all of those who think I'm PNM or not PNM, but all due respect to the Prime Minister, and I was not against her at all, if she was to stand in a public forum and say the things that she has said, whether it is with regard to how CPEP and URP, by the way, which has not been ventilated, or the Privy Council has not decided on that, by the way, right? With all the things, the recruitment drive, this thing is supposed to revitalize the economy, which we do not have any clear statement. With all the things, I do not think that the Prime Minister is going to get the support that she got from the people of this country. The unfortunate thing is, and you know, you and I have said this, Sean, off record, we have both lamented the fact that the Prime Minister and her government have squandered the goodwill. They have squandered the
tremendous goodwill.
Yes,
tremendous levels of goodwill.
And you see, when you tell me what you're doing, oh, I'm doing the things with the traffic thing for your good. When I just came here, when you come in here, you know how many potholes you have to go through? I'm surprised that car has not fallen apart. Nearly every road in Port Elizabeth, I don't know about in the rural communities.
Oh, it gets worse in certain rural communities.
Oh my goodness! And then you want to tell me you protected me? Protect me when it comes to drunk driving. Protect me when I'm driving fast. But you are going to want to charge me for my tires. You want to charge? It's all about taxes. So what has happened to this government? They have lost so much credibility that when the Prime Minister says something, I do not believe that the people of this country are willing to listen to her. The unfortunate thing, which is what I said to you, I'm sure, is what is the alternative?
Right.
What is the alternative?
Well, before we get there, I just want to say this quick. A lot of the economic policies, you could see where the people who are going to be harmed the most are at the lower ends of the economic ladder.
Transfer tax is a good example.
And then now, when you have less money to go around, how are you going to afford to fix your car up to standard immediately? How? And dare I ask this, because I think there's enough to prove this to be true. If the PNM did these things, what do you think the UNC would have said? If the PNM instituted the exact same policies and the exact same messaging, I would hazard a guess that they would be criticizing them left, right, and center with the harshest of terms. They did with the property tax. And what was wrong with the property tax? When the PNM government said, well, if you can't afford it, sell. Who agreed with that? And now we're putting people in a similar situation. Well, if you can't afford it, sell. Right? But more importantly, and I said this before the opposition leader said this in her press conference after my show yesterday morning. You criticized Dr. Keith Rowley for not being at the press conference to announce the state of emergency at the end of December 2024. Has the Prime Minister been to any of the press conferences that she has had, her administration? The first one didn't even have a member of cabinet. The first one had the police commissioner announce it, right? I don't know why they thought that looked better. But she was absent to all of them. So by her own standards, if we were to judge her, which I have and am, she comes up wanting by her own standards.
That's very true.
What am I supposed to make of that?
Why is she afraid to face the public? Why is she afraid to answer the hard questions? You know, and that does bring the question, why was she, I don't know if it's hiding, but she certainly used the X and the media in order to respond to criticism. And it's time for her to come forward and answer the hard questions.
Now back to what you said, what's the alternative? And I agree with you. The PNM had a situation where, and you could debate the timing, but coming down towards the end, the last 2 years, maybe last 3 years, we faced a phenomenon here on Talking Points. We ran out of good things to say about the government at the time. And it bothered me that everything I had to say about the Dr. Keith Rowley administration started to come across almost, not 100%, but by a landslide negative. And I was very uncomfortable to do that because I am not here to attack him for the sake of attacking him or to attack his government for the sake of attacking him. And now, not even a year has passed, and I've said this to you multiple times, and you have agreed with me every single time. All of the goodwill that they had, all of the hope that we ourselves felt that things might change, and we have some of the same exact issues, and we're not even a year in with regards to how they're treating the media, how they're trying to cover things up, what policies they're trying to institute, and it feels as though we are almost in the exact same place
worse, you know,
with the same issues.
You know why it's a little worse? It feels almost suffocating. The Prime Minister will not take any criticism, and her response is so, I don't want to use the word vulgar, but I don't know.
Well, at times, yes.
Yes, she goes after the Law Association, eat her food, dance, PNM.
Oh, by the way, let's not forget that this current state of emergency had to have been technically declared. The Prime Minister announced it, but legally it was declared by that low-level, quote-unquote, PNM functionary, according to her, right? Who had to, yes, who had to declare it for you, right? And one of the things I said in the past was, when they first declared a state of emergency, well, look, a PNM president is not fighting against this measure. We need to consider it to be more seriously. But now, that whole situation, I find it very ironic. I don't know to what extent the president could deny it, but at the end of the day, her name is on it. The same person that you chastised, derided, insulted, her name is on it as part of the public record, right? She declared it for you. What do you have to say about that? Why is it that it's one thing to criticize the independent bench. It's another thing to criticize the independent bench before they do the thing you're criticizing them for.
The way she's doing it, I mean, it's really surprising that as the leader of this country, that she's taken the approach that she has taken. I mean, what the Prime Minister does not say is what she does not have to say again. The language that she uses is not really robust. It's almost bordering on vulgarity. It's almost as if it's things that she would say privately among her members of parliament and ministers, but she would not go into a public domain and say that. Yet she's saying what do you think she would say privately? She's saying it publicly.
When Dr. Rowley said certain phrases like, I am not in your bedroom.
Yes.
And of course it's like a woman. Everybody took great offense to that, right? And rightfully so.
Rightfully so.
I would just like to know, because apparently she said it in a public forum that there's video evidence of this. I'm not going to bother to look for it. But there's a certain government minister that seemingly is obsessed with the anatomy of one MP of St. Anne's East. And the Prime Minister has decided also to express not necessarily a similar level of obsession, but a similar opinion. Why is that acceptable? What does that have to do with governance?
State emergency regulations.
Right? What does that have to do with anything with regards to running the country responsibly? Because Mr. Young has a lot to answer for. But his anatomy is not one of those things that I care to be debated on national government media. It is completely unnecessary. So now I am in one of the things is, you're uncomfortable, I think you will agree with me, with the direction of the country, and the fact that we're not seeing any sort of positive way forward. We see a lot of the same old, a different coat of paint, but also to me as well, it is extremely uncomfortable, even now when we are criticizing the Prime Minister. I am extremely uncomfortable because I don't want to criticize the Prime Minister. But I'm actually left in a situation where I can't necessarily fault you for saying anything that you're saying. I can't necessarily disagree with you or find a contrarian opinion because I myself are stuck in the same place. So what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to suppress my opinions and suppress Karen for the first time ever on Talking Point and say, no, we can't say it? Why? We have to be fair. We said it with regards to Dr. Rowley.
Yeah.
We have to say it again.
Yeah.
Now, granted, maybe there are good explanations that they're not giving us. Well, then the question is why? Right? If you leave us to speculate, and this is the same thing this is the same thing we said about the last government. If you leave us to speculate, don't be upset when we go in directions that you don't like. Because we want to hear the truth from you. We just need you to tell us.
Yeah, we do.
So we need to close there. So yeah, last
okay,
no, you can have the last one.
Okay, because what we were ending with, I suppose, was the prescription. What would I consider things that the government could do? One, the language should be more measured and more restrained. There's no need for the Prime Minister, whether it's dealing with CARICOM, whether it's dealing with the local situation, whether it's dealing with independent bench, whether it's dealing with the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, whatever the areas, there's no need for to use language that is bellicose, that is almost gone beyond aggression. And I would advise that in dealing with these matters, to take a note and be more dignified and be more measured, because you're representing the people of this country who do not always necessarily share your views. The other thing too is we in Trinidad and Tobago, food security. That is what America has, that's what Europe has, that's what we do not have. And I think that one of the things that you should be focusing on in your diversification of this economy is creating food security. Also, in terms of creating opportunities, not just for fiscal diversification, increasing taxes, but you should also be looking at possibly cultural tourism. We have seen with the carnival that just passed how much foreign exchange that this country can earn, whether it is in hotels that people stay in, the bands that they play with. There are so many opportunities in this country, not only in Carnival, but also in Pagua, also in Parang. There are so many opportunities. Soca. Trinidad is just, I mean, we have so much to offer the world, the global stage. And instead of you concentrating on finding means to diversify the economy, deal also with institutional weakness, the Revenue Authority. Think about bringing that back. Is the answer increasing the taxes a point that is prohibitive, or is it more effective that you use the framework of the Revenue Authority?
They didn't fix, as far as I'm aware, BR and customs, by the way, and with all these extra...
Right, and the energy too, coming down so hard against the energy sector.
The energy chamber and the energy sector.
And because Dr. Dax, I think that is part of the reason, he came out and said there's too much red tape. There are too many silos operating within the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago, and we need to deal with the poor management. Soon after that, we see Dr. Driver has so I think what we have to have is more a more measured approach, a more focused approach, a more restrained approach, focus on developing the diversification of this economy, give us focus on food security, going up the value chain with the agri and agri-industry. There's a lot of opportunity there. I think the country needs to see that and take us away from all this bacchanalia that the country has been consumed with since you have come into office. It's unfortunate. I don't think many of us felt that this is where we would be today. And I certainly am not one of those who was against your government. I certainly wanted you to succeed, so that if I am saying what I'm saying, it is because of love of country. By the way, it is love of country. That is number one. And if the love of country, and I believe that you had the ability to bring together all the disparate parts of what was Trinidad and Tobago. You had the charisma, you had the charm, you had all the things that were necessary to have good. Yeah, and yes, and you had it, and people were willing to give you that. And instead of doing that, you have squandered it. So if I were to end, those are some of the prescriptions. Focus on diversifying the economy. Focus on the cultural tourism. Focus on agri and agri-industry. There's so much, the chocolate industry, the cocoa, the Trinitario cocoa, all the things that people were speaking about prior to the this new government coming into effect. Focus on that. We need to hear more about that and less about all the state of emergency, ZOSA, and all that goes with it.
And I didn't say it before, but I had to say it now. If it's similar criticisms, so it's not as though the opposition or we're ready to give the PNM immediately. Let's go back to them, because it's the same criticisms, right? So now the question that Karen had, who is the alternative? That is going to haunt us, because Mr. San Fernando, it haunted him even before the election, to be honest, right? Look, if the communication was more measured, more responsible, right, more reasonable, and if there was better transparency and accountability for the decisions being made, a lot of these policies could have done the same policies. It would have come across a lot differently, and the perception of the government by those who are not the diehard supporters probably would be a lot differently. But unfortunately, we won't know exactly how it would have worked out, but there's still a chance, potentially, hopefully, to turn things around. At the very least, what Karen said initially, with regards to how you communicate. Improve that. That, to me, I think is half the battle. With that said, thanks to the callers. Oh, shucks, there's a comment. I don't want it, let's say, as controversial as it is, Karen, please forgive me if I rush through this. This is a very controversial statement. What if a one-month African in this country stop killing each other by gangs or otherwise? I have no doubt that month will be very low. Thanks, a tough one. Here's the thing.
I want to know, I want to answer that person, because the person is obviously making a connection between crime and the African community. Is that what they're doing?
Well, yes.
Okay, so I want you to read the Guardian article. I want you to read the Guardian article that talked about the multi-million-dollar persons who are the #1 criminals in this country. It's in the Guardian. Who are the ones who are the money launderers? Who are the ones that are bringing in the girls, the human trafficking, the ones that have the tire place, what do you call it, selling parts for your car parts, the ones that have the little restaurant, the bar. Those are if you want to look for the criminals, you define who a criminal is. You tell me who will end up in a jail or a prison, and when you have defined that, you come back and tell me that the African person is responsible, because behind every African person who you are alleging is behind the crime in this country, there's somebody who's paying for the guns. There's somebody who's running, you don't have to be politicians. The article from The Guardian, they talk about the multi-million-dollar business of crime in this country. And I suspect it's not a little African boy who you see shooting up on those videos. I am not saying they are not part of the problem. They are not the only problem. And that is part of the reason why that ZOSA could not succeed. Because behind that ZOSA, and I've said that to you already, Sean, behind that ZOSA was a unstated intention that the reason why we had so much criminal activity in this country is because of the gangs, and the gangs equal the young African young men. And we very well know that it's not the truth, and I take great exception for you, whoever you are, coming and saying that. Get your facts and bring it us. If you bring your facts, I'll listen. I swear, if you bring your facts, I will listen.
The problem is, I feel statistical analysis on this is very misleading. Correlation is not causation. I mean, what is one of the most famous gangs in the history of our country? The Dolce gang. I'll just leave that there, right? So,
and we don't want to go down that road.
Let's not forget, transnational crime comes from Latin America.
We do not want to go down
right?
that road.
And also, look, to say that all crime is one race, it's going to take a lot more than just saying, oh, what is the demographic statistics?
By the way, what I'm talking about is Trinidad and Tobago Police Service did that survey. It's not what the Guardian newspaper decided was an opinion piece. They took the data from what had been collected by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And so if you want to make a statement like that, I do not have a problem with you saying that, but back it up.
Now, I'll just say this. Does anyone in this country, when you say the term Mr. Big in crime, what do you picture?
Exactly.
I'll leave that there. Folks, to be fair, the commenter did say it's a controversial statement. So,
yes, that's true.
But you have to understand, you will inflame the passions of some people when you touch on certain subjects in certain ways. In fact, even if you try to do it as responsible as possible, you will cause hurt feelings.
Yeah, but you know what though, Sean? In all fairness, yes, in all fairness to the person, it takes a lot of courage to come out and say something that is very controversial. So don't misunderstand me. I don't take exception to you doing that. What I take exception to you doing is if you're going to make that statement, just back it up. If you back it up, I will listen to you.
Okay, so with that said, way over time. So have a good day. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe. We will see you tomorrow. Be nice. It's nice to be nice. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome back to Dollars and Cents. I'm Darren Jacobs, a Senior Financial Advisor, and I'm here to guide you through smart financial decisions that can protect your wealth and boost your bottom line. Now, on today's episode, I'll be talking about wills, trusts, beneficiaries, and life insurance and how they all tie in together. So, I'd like to start with understanding life insurance and what is life insurance.